The call came just as the morning sun began to slip through my kitchen window. I was stirring sugar into my coffee when my phone started buzzing on the counter. The screen flashed a familiar name, Ethan, my son. His voice on the other end wasn't the calm, confident tone he usually used when asking for favors. It was frantic. "Mom, why are all the cards declined? None of them work. Nicole and I can't pay for lunch. Everyone's staring at us." I could hear the panic in every syllable. Plates clattering in the background, the muffled chatter of a restaurant, the awkward silence of people realizing something embarrassing was happening. I took a slow sip of coffee before answering. "Good morning, Ethan." "Mom, please! We're at Blue Harbor Grill with Nicole's mother. Do you understand how humiliating this is? She had to step outside to make a call, and the waiter's standing here waiting for the payment." His words tumbled out like stones. But to my own surprise, I didn't feel anxious. I felt calm. In fact, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, a quiet, measured satisfaction. Because I knew exactly why those cards weren't working. I leaned back in my chair, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence between us. "Maybe," I said slowly, "it's time you started paying for your own lunches." He went quiet for a second, then his voice cracked, desperate and angry. "Mom, don't play games right now. This isn't funny. People are laughing." That word laughing was what finally stirred something inside me, because I could still remember, with painful clarity, the sound of laughter that had shattered something deep in me the night before. The laughter of my son, the laughter of his wife. And it all started in my own living room, over a cup of coffee I had brewed for them with love and habit. As Ethan's voice kept echoing through the line, begging for me to fix this mess, I stared at the framed photo on my kitchen wall, me, my late husband, and little Ethan at the beach in Street Augustine. I remembered the boy who once brought me wildflowers and called me his hero. Now that boy was gone, replaced by a man who treated me like a credit line. "Mom, say something," he demanded. I set my cup down and took a breath. "Ethan, if you want to know why the cards don't work," I said quietly, "you'll have to listen to what really happened last night." And as I hung up the phone, my hand steady and my heart coldly clear, I knew this was only the beginning. Because last night, for the first time in 10 years, I had stopped being their bank and started being their lesson. The night before that phone call, my house had been filled with the sound of laughter, just not the kind that warms a mother's heart. I had spent the whole afternoon preparing dinner: a roast, mashed potatoes, and lemon pie, Ethan's favorite when he was little. It was supposed to be a small celebration for Nicole's promotion. She worked as a marketing coordinator for a local real estate firm in Jacksonville, and I thought it would be nice to make her feel proud. When they arrived, they didn't even notice the flowers on the table or the fresh linens I had ironed. Nicole was on her phone, scrolling through photos of handbags, and Ethan barely looked up from his smartwatch. Still, I smiled and poured the wine, pretending everything was fine. That's what mothers do, we pretend. Halfway through dinner, Nicole invited 2 of her coworkers to drop by for dessert. They arrived laughing loudly, bringing the smell of expensive perfume and arrogance into my modest living room. I didn't mind. I told myself it was good to see young people enjoying life. Then, it happened. Nicole lifted her glass and said in a syrupy voice, "To my wonderful mother-in-law, Marilyn, the most generous woman alive. She pays our rent, our bills, our vacations, pretty much everything." The room erupted in laughter. Even Ethan chuckled, shaking his head like it was some harmless joke. I froze, still holding the coffee pot. The smell of roasted beans suddenly made me nauseous. One of the coworkers added between giggles, "Wow, Nicole, I wish my mother-in-law was that rich and easygoing." My ears rang. I wanted to believe I misheard them. But then Ethan said something that broke the last thread of illusion. "Yeah, Mom's always been the family safety net. She loves taking care of us. It makes her feel useful. Useful, like a tool." Their laughter rolled on while I stood there, invisible in my own home. No one saw the way my hands trembled as I poured the coffee. No one noticed how my eyes burned but refused to cry. When they finally left around 10, I gathered the dishes in silence. The dining room smelled like lemon pie and humiliation. My reflection in the dark window looked older than I remembered, tired, foolish, and used. I went to my bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the framed photo of Ethan as a child holding his first report card. I used to believe that love meant giving everything you could. That's what my late husband and I built our lives around: generosity, sacrifice, family. But as I turned off the light that night, one truth seared itself into my mind. To them, I wasn't family anymore. I was finance. And I knew, before dawn came, something in me would change forever. I woke up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, the echo of their laughter still buzzing in my ears. The digital clock glowed 3:07 a.m. in the darkness. For a long moment, I just sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the framed photo of my husband on the nightstand. "John," I whispered, my voice trembling, "I think I've been a fool." I turned on the lamp, grabbed my robe, and walked toward my small home office. The floor creaked under my bare feet. On the desk sat my laptop, a stack of bank statements, and a pen holder engraved with Ethan's name, a Father's Day gift I had once bought for him to give to his own father. My fingers shook as I logged into my online banking. I'd been retired for 7 years, surviving comfortably on my pension and the savings John and I built over 40 years of work. But as the numbers loaded on the screen, a cold weight sank into my stomach. The balance was far lower than it should have been. I opened the statements month by month, watching the pattern unfold like a slow-motion car crash. Payments to luxury clothing stores, flight bookings, hotel charges, restaurant bills, all tied to the cards I had given Ethan and Nicole for emergencies. But then something new caught my eye. A joint account I didn't remember approving. Ethan's name sat beside mine, recently added. The digital signature looked exactly like mine. Too perfect. I clicked Download Transaction History. My breath caught. A transfer for $18,000 had been initiated just 2 days earlier from my investment account to their shared checking. It was marked as gift. Gift. The word made my skin crawl. I printed the documents, my heart pounding with each page sliding out of the printer. I could almost hear John's voice from years ago. "Marilyn, never sign anything you don't understand." I hadn't signed this. The fog of guilt and love that had blinded me for years cleared in one sharp instant. I wasn't just being used, I was being robbed. At 3:40 a.m., I called the emergency line for my bank and froze the accounts. I canceled every card with Ethan's name on it, blocked all automatic transfers, and changed every password. When the representative asked if I wanted to file a fraud report, I said yes. My voice came out calm and steady. By 5 a.m., it was done. I stepped outside onto the back porch. The Florida air was heavy with the smell of salt and jasmine. The sky was pale gray, the first hint of sunrise. For the first time in years, my chest felt light. I wasn't afraid anymore, because when the sun came up, my son would wake to find his entire world cut off, and for the first time, he would have to face life without my wallet to save him. The morning air was still cool when I heard the sound of tires screeching against my driveway. I didn't have to look through the blinds to know who it was. My heart didn't race the way it used to when Ethan was in trouble. Instead, I took another sip of coffee and waited. The car doors slammed almost in unison. "Mom, open the door!" Ethan's voice was sharp, almost frantic. I stayed seated at the kitchen table, letting his voice echo through the hallway. "Marilyn, come on!" Nicole's tone followed shrill, demanding. "You're acting insane! Do you have any idea what you've done?" The pounding on the front door began first fists, then the heel of a shoe. I stood slowly, walked to the window beside the door, and peeked through the curtain. Ethan was pacing in the driveway, his face red and sweating. Nicole stood beside him in her designer heels, holding her phone like a weapon. When our eyes met through the glass, Ethan's face softened for a moment. "Mom," he pleaded, "please open the door. We just need to talk." I cracked the door open 2 inches, enough for my voice to pass, but not for them to come in. "You've already talked enough, Ethan. Last night you made yourselves very clear." Nicole crossed her arms. "Oh, please! You're really doing this because of a joke? We were kidding, Marilyn. You're overreacting." "That joke, as you call it, wasn't funny," I said quietly. "It was the truth you've been hiding behind laughter." Ethan took a step closer. "Mom, listen. Whatever's going on with the cards, you need to fix it right now. We were at Blue Harbor Grill with my mother-in-law. The waiter practically threatened to call security. Do you know how embarrassing that was?" "Humiliation," I said softly, "has a way of teaching lessons faster than words." Nicole's face twisted. "Are you proud of yourself? Making your son look like a fool in public? Do you even care what people will think?" I looked her straight in the eyes. "For years, I cared about what people thought. That's how you both got away with treating me like an endless resource. But I care about something else now, myself." She scoffed, glancing at Ethan. "You see? She's losing it. We should call someone. This isn't normal behavior." I felt a surge of calm amusement. "Go ahead, Nicole. Call whoever you want. But remember, this conversation is being recorded." That made her freeze. Her face turned pale, and for the first time, Ethan looked genuinely uneasy. "Mom, don't do this," he said quietly. "We're family." "Family doesn't steal," I replied. "Family doesn't mock, and family doesn't forge signatures." Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "What are you talking about?" "You'll find out soon enough," I said, closing the door gently but firmly. The sound of their arguing voices faded as they walked back to the car. I watched from the window as they sat there for a long minute, probably planning what to do next. I knew this wasn't the end, but for the first time in years, they were outside my door, and I was the one holding the key literally and figuratively. When their car finally pulled away, I whispered to myself, "You raised him to be strong, Marilyn. Now let him prove it." And then I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. By the time I arrived at Davenport and Wells' law office, the Florida heat was already creeping through the morning air. The receptionist smiled politely as I explained that I needed to see Mr. Davenport, my longtime attorney. Within minutes, I was sitting across from him in his oak-paneled office. He adjusted his glasses and looked at me carefully. "You sounded serious on the phone, Mrs. Parker. What's going on?" I placed the printed bank statements on his desk, the forged authorization, the transfer history, the screenshots of emails from the bank. Someone added my son's name to one of my investment accounts without my consent, and I think I know who. Mr. Davenport examined the documents for several minutes in silence. Then he nodded grimly. "This signature looks digitally copied. Whoever did this used your scanned file from previous authorizations." "That would have to be Ethan or Nicole," I said, keeping my tone steady. "They've had access to my computer before. I trusted them with everything." Mr. Davenport leaned back. "You've taken the right steps. Freezing the accounts was smart. You've protected yourself legally." I sighed. "They're already trying to twist the story." Nicole's mother came to my house this morning, pretending to be concerned. Then she hinted that if I don't restore their access, they'll talk to a judge about declaring me mentally unfit to handle my finances. Mr. Davenport didn't even blink. Classic manipulation. But don't worry, that threat has no legal weight unless there's proof of incapacity, which clearly there isn't. However, I recommend getting a psychological competency evaluation immediately, just to have documented evidence in case they try something. He paused, flipping through the documents again. "This unauthorized transfer, though that's not just family drama, that's financial fraud. Depending on the evidence, you could file criminal charges. The word fraud felt heavy in the air. The mother in me recoiled, but the woman in me, the one who'd been humiliated and robbed, leaned forward. "If it comes to that," I said quietly, "I won't hesitate." Mr. Davenport gave a small, approving nod. "Good. Also, let's review your estate plan. I see Ethan is currently listed as your sole heir. He won't be for long." For the next hour, we rewrote my will. 50% of my estate would go to the Jacksonville Senior Trust, a charity that supported elderly victims of financial abuse. 30% would go to my sister Ruth, who had never once asked me for a dime. The remaining 20%, only accessible to Ethan, would be placed in a trust, conditional on him proving 1 full year of financial independence. When I left the office, the tension in my chest had finally eased. But as I pulled into my driveway, my peace vanished. A silver SUV was parked in front of my house. Standing beside it was Sylvia, Nicole's mother, dressed immaculately in pearls and heels, holding her purse like a gavel. She smiled, though her eyes were anything but kind. "Good afternoon, Marilyn," she said smoothly. "We need to talk woman to woman." And just like that, I knew the next battle had begun. "Woman to woman," Sylvia repeated as she stepped closer, her perfume too strong for the heat. "Let's be reasonable. You're making a scene that's damaging everyone's reputation, especially your own." I stood still on my porch, my keys still in my hand. "What exactly do you want, Sylvia?" She smiled tightly. "I want to help you. Dana told me you've been confused lately, forgetting things, acting impulsively. We're worried about you." Her words landed like cold raindrops. "Confused?" I repeated. "Yes," she said quickly. "And if this goes on, we might have to involve legal counsel to make sure you're protected." Protected. The word almost made me laugh. "You mean controlled," I replied quietly. Her mask slipped. "If you're not careful, Marilyn, you could lose everything, your finances, your credibility. People talk, you know, especially when older women make rash decisions." I opened the door halfway and gestured toward my driveway. "Then let them talk somewhere else. I've already spoken to my lawyer." Her smile faded. "Oh, I see. So that's how you want to play this." She turned and walked away, heels clicking sharply against the concrete. The moment her SUV disappeared down the street, I exhaled and sank onto the porch step. For the first time, I realized how far they were willing to go. That night, following Mr. Davenport's advice, I scheduled a full psychological evaluation at a private clinic downtown. The next morning, I sat across from Dr. Lewis, a calm woman in her 50s with soft gray eyes and a clipboard balanced on her lap. "I understand your family is questioning your mental capacity," she said gently. "That must be upsetting." "Upsetting?" I smiled faintly. "It's insulting. I'm not losing my mind. I'm just done losing my money." She chuckled softly and began the assessment. Memory tests, problem-solving exercises, questions about judgment and reasoning. After 2 hours, she put her pen down. "Mrs. Parker," she said, "you're sharper than most of my younger patients. Setting financial boundaries doesn't make you unstable, it makes you sane. I'll prepare an official report confirming full competency." I thanked her and drove home feeling lighter. But my relief didn't last long. That evening, as I made tea, my phone buzzed with an email from the bank. Security alert. Unauthorized login attempt on a closed account. I opened it and froze. The attempt had been made from an IP address registered to Ethan's apartment. I forwarded the message to Mr. Davenport immediately. 10 minutes later, he called. "Marilyn, you were right to contact me. The bank's fraud department just found something else. A forged transfer request for $20,000, filed 2 days before you canceled everything." My heart went cold. "Whose name is on it?" He hesitated, then said, "Ethan's." but the handwriting, well, it looks like Nicole's. I pressed the phone to my ear, staring out at the quiet Jacksonville street, the evening sun washing my porch in gold. They hadn't just used me. They had plotted behind my back, and now they had crossed into crime. The next morning, I woke up with a strange mix of anger and calm determination. I had spent years being afraid of confrontation, afraid of losing my son, afraid of being alone. But now, I realized that fear was exactly what had kept me in chains. My neighbor June, a retired school teacher who lived next door, noticed me out in the yard clipping rose stems. She leaned over the fence. "Rough week?" she asked, her eyes kind but knowing. "You could say that," I replied. She nodded. "Then maybe you need what I needed, a little distance. I just got a flyer about a 5-day cruise to the Bahamas leaving next Wednesday. I was going to go with my sister, but she's sick. You should come instead." A cruise. The idea felt foreign, almost rebellious. The last time I'd traveled for pleasure was before John passed away. For years, I'd only written checks so others could travel Ethan's honeymoon, Nicole's birthdays, family vacations I was never invited to. "Maybe it's time," I said slowly, surprising even myself. June's smile widened. "Good. I'll book it before you change your mind." 2 days later, we boarded the Ocean Serenity, a white ship gleaming under the Jacksonville Sunday. As we stepped on deck, the salty wind hit my face, and for the first time in years, I felt alive, not as a mother or a provider, but simply as me. The first night, we had dinner with a small group of women around my age. Over wine and laughter, I discovered something shocking. Every single one of them had their own story of being drained, dismissed, or manipulated by family. One woman, Helen, a retired nurse from Alabama, said quietly, "My daughter maxed out my credit cards and took out loans in my name. I only found out when the collectors showed up at my door." Another woman, Isabel, nodded. "My son made me sell my house to pay for his business. I ended up in a rented apartment. He never looked back." Their stories were heartbreaking, yet comforting. I wasn't alone. We weren't crazy old women. We were survivors of love twisted into obligation. That night, I stood on the deck, the ocean black and endless around us. The wind whipped through my gray hair as I whispered into the darkness, "No more guilt." The next morning, over coffee with June, I called Mr. Davenport. "I want to finalize my new will," I said. 60% of my estate goes to the Jacksonville Senior Trust for victims of financial abuse, 25% to my sister Ruth, 15% to Ethan, conditional on 1 full year of verified financial independence. Mr. Davenport smiled through the phone. "I'll make it official." When I hung up, I felt lighter than the sea breeze. 5 days passed in a blur of laughter, sunsets, and late-night talks on the upper deck. For the first time, I wasn't calculating anyone else's needs. I wasn't financing anyone's happiness but my own. On the final night, as the ship glided toward the lights of Jacksonville, I looked out at the glowing horizon and whispered, "John, I think you'd be proud." I finally stopped saving them and started saving myself. When I returned home from the cruise, my house felt different. Quiet, yes, but no longer heavy. The silence was peaceful, not lonely. I made tea, opened the curtains, and let the morning light fill every corner. For the first time in years, the walls didn't echo with tension or guilt. 2 days later, my phone rang. The caller ID read Ethan. I hesitated before answering. "Mom?" His voice was softer than I remembered. "Can I come by?" "Alone." I agreed. An hour later, his car pulled into the driveway. He didn't rush to the door this time. He walked slowly, shoulders slumped, his face pale and tired. When he stepped inside, his eyes darted around the living room, as if expecting hostility. Instead, I gestured toward the couch. "Sit down, Ethan." He took a deep breath. "Mom, I owe you the truth. About everything." I folded my hands in my lap. Go on. He looked down. The forged transfer, the one Mr. Davenport mentioned, it wasn't me. It was Nicole. She used my computer, my digital ID. I didn't know until the bank called. She said it was just to move money around for a better interest rate. I believed her. Until you didn't. He nodded. When you froze the accounts, she panicked. Then she admitted everything. She said you'd eventually die anyway, and the money would be ours. She just wanted it sooner. The words cut deep, but my face stayed calm. I filed a report, he continued. She moved out last week. I'm filing for divorce. I watched him, searching for signs of deceit, but his eyes were red and raw. And what are you going to do now, Ethan? He swallowed hard. I got a second job. I canceled all the luxury subscriptions. I'm moving to a smaller apartment, and I wanted to pay you back, at least part of what I owe. I sold my watch. He reached into his pocket and placed a small envelope on the table. Inside were a few $100s, barely a fraction of what he'd taken over the years. But it wasn't about the amount, it was the gesture. I looked at him for a long time. You've caused a lot of pain, I said quietly. Not just with the money, but with the way you made me feel invisible. But this is the first real thing you've done in years. He wiped his eyes. I know, Mom. I just want to earn back your respect. Then start by living a life that doesn't depend on me. He nodded, standing. Can I come by next Sunday? Maybe cook you dinner this time? For the first time, I smiled. That sounds nice. After he left, I walked onto the porch. The sky was orange and pink, the air heavy with the scent of magnolia. I sat in John's old rocking chair and listened to the world settle into evening. Later that night, I called Mr. Davenport. Let's modify the will one last time, I told him. If Ethan maintains his independence for 2 years, he'll receive a larger share. If he continues that pattern for 5, he gets the full amount. But if he slips back, it reverts to charity. He chuckled. A fair balance between love and accountability. When I hung up, I looked out at the stars and whispered, that's what love should be. Love isn't endless sacrifice. It isn't giving until you disappear. It's teaching those you love to stand tall without leaning on your shoulders. That night, for the first time in a decade, I slept without worry. And in my dreams, John smiled proud, peaceful, and free. Being a good parent doesn't mean saving your children from every fall. Sometimes it means stepping aside and letting them learn how to stand. In setting boundaries, I hadn't lost my son. I had finally given him the chance to grow.